Credit to Nintendo Utopia for the gameplay footage used in this video. Link in the description. Kirby. What can be said about him that hasn't been said already? Probably nothing, but I'm gonna talk for a while anyways. This little guy is amazing, considered one of Nintendo's key mascots alongside Mario, Link, Pikachu, and Bill Trinen, and he's had some phenomenal games over the years. He's been in action since April 27, 1992 with Kirby's Dream Land, and since then, he's had 13 original mainline games, 15 counting remakes, and more spin-offs than I have run-on sentences. The great thing is, unlike, say, Mario, who has his fair share of real duds, Kirby games are pretty much always fun with a capital F. Pop one of the main titles in, and you can pretty much always expect to have a good time. However, there is one game that Kirby fans and non-fans alike have a bit more hesitance over. One game that consistently ranks near the bottom of people's lists. One game that everyone agrees is a true disappointment. Kirby Slide for the GBA e-reader. It's literally just a sliding tile game with one 3x3 puzzle. Oh yeah, and also Star Allies sometimes. Kirby Star Allies, the 12th original mainline entry in the series, and the first Kirby game ever for Nintendo Switch, which also makes it the first HD main entry since the Wii U only got a coloring book. The game had a fair amount of excitement building up to its release. Sure, some people were disappointed that it was still a 2D side-scroller, but, I mean, that's pretty much all Kirby games. I don't think anyone was expecting a first-person shooter. But the game was bringing back 4-player multiplayer, a version of the ability mixing from Crystal Shards. It looked beautiful, and with the last main entry, Planet Robobot, generally considered one of, if not the best Kirby game ever, this was going to be an amazing game. Everyone hated it. Yeah, for some reason, this game was just not well received, especially at launch. Hell, even now, some people still consider it one of, if not the absolute worst game in the series, at least for games that weren't on a card. It was too easy, it was too vanilla, it was too short. I'm sure if you're watching this, you've heard the complaints before. The game is the 4th lowest rated game in the series on Metacritic, and while a lot of people will defend Dreamland 1, 3, and Squeak Squad, I really don't see anyone arguing that Star Allies is better than it's given credit for. So is it weird to say that this is one of my favorite Kirby games ever? Yes, today I'm going to be giving Kirby Star Allies a deeper look, asking why do so many people dislike this game, and is it better than people give it credit for? Now, don't get me wrong, I am fully aware how biased I am. I'm a longtime Kirby fan, and I literally just said Star Allies was one of my favorites. However, that doesn't mean I'm going to let the game off easy. If something's actually wrong, believe me, I'll let you know. The game starts with 3 modes, and let's just get the sub-games out of the way first. These are basically just 4-player mini-games. They are nowhere near as fleshed out as Triple Deluxe and Planet Robobot's offerings. We have a timing game where Kirby hits a meteor back into space, a button-mashing tree cutter that I quite frankly suck at, and that's it. It's a little disappointing, since the sub-games from the last 2 entries were so good, they got expanded versions that are more like full games, but hey, they're mini-games, it's fine. Let's look at the main story. We start with a pretty ominous cutscene showing a weird robed figure shooting dark stars out across Planet Popstar and DDD seemingly getting really into one of them. And then Kirby wakes up and, well, it's adventure time. This is very similar to the opening to Planet Robobot, with something happening to the planet while Kirby is asleep and he runs off after he wakes up, but, I mean, Kirby games aren't necessarily known for their plots. At least not at the starts of the games. By the end they get pretty wild. So let's hop into the first level and see what's up. Yep, this is a Kirby game, alright. Okay, so the first complaint people have with Star Allies. This is a very vanilla cookie-cutter Kirby game with very little identity of its own, at least in terms of the levels. It's not exactly shocking, most Kirby games do have very standard platforming locations, but the thing is, this is coming right off the heels of Planet Robobot. That game had charm and personality oozing out of every pixel, and a consistent theme throughout that spiced up every world. Star Allies just doesn't have that. This is as back to basics as you can get for Kirby, right down to the starting problem Kirby's dealing with being basically the exact same setup as the original Dreamland. DDD stealing food, go stop him. I definitely understand why people would be disappointed by this, as it is a definite step backwards from the last couple games. And considering how similar the gameplay is to Return to Dreamland, which was also a back-to-basics Kirby game, but with the excuse it was the first console entry in the main series since the N64, it all does leave the game lacking a bit of identity. Personally though, I do think it kind of works. Don't get me wrong, I'd love if the game had a bit more of an identity in its design, but being honest, the level visuals aren't the only thing that can set a game apart, and frankly, I'm not sure they should be the main thing separating them. Speaking of visuals though, my god, this game looks good. It only runs at 30 FPS, which is a bit disappointing, but in exchange, we get gorgeous looking areas, and even good looking character models. Seriously, this is a good looking game. That's part of why I'm kind of okay with it looking kind of generic. This is the first main game to be in HD, or in handheld mode close to HD, and they clearly put a lot of work in to make the game look the best it could on Switch. I especially love the visuals for the Dreamland grasslands, which make the world so much more distinct from standard grasslands and platformers. It's super cool. Now the gameplay, yeah, this is mostly pretty standard. Listen, Return to Dreamland introduced an amazing style of gameplay. Expanding on Superstar's abilities can use multiple moves format with tighter controls and a lot of fun ideas for level design. I don't blame HAL for using that same gameplay style as the basis for Kirby moving forward, but the thing is, this is the fourth game that uses it. And while Kirby largely plays similarly between most entries, pretty much every mainline game before Return played pretty damn differently than every other one, at least in one or two ways. So, what makes this game different from the others? Well, allow me to introduce the friend mechanic, sort of inspired by Superstar, but with a very different implementation. The friendship gimmick is the game's main variation from standard Kirby. Throw a little pink heart in an enemy, bam, instant best friend. It is a pretty fun idea, and this is how you get the co-op for the game. Now, most of the friends play more or less identically to how Kirby controls with their copy ability, and you can't make friends with literally every enemy in the game. Bronto Burt will get his day in the sun another time, but it is a pretty cool way to do co-op. The thing is, this isn't exactly an optional mechanic like the previous co-op mechanics. The levels are pretty much all built around having at least one friend, and for most of the gimmicks, you need a full team of 4, 1 Kirby and 3 friends. This does mean a lot of the game had to be shifted to accommodate the friends, and as we'll get into, this is a bit controversial. Personally, I've never played the game co-op, but I do think playing with the AI is alright. They can be a bit dumb at times, and it's annoying how mini-bosses pose a good chance of transferring their abilities to friends whether you want them to or not, but overall, they do the job decently enough. I've heard the game is more fun with IRL friends playing co-op, but again, I'm pretty lonely. The friends also bring the game's other 2 gimmicks into play, the first and most obvious being the ability mixing. This is an interesting idea, sort of a mix between Crystal Shard's combo abilities and the special mixed abilities from Squeak Squad, though a lot more fleshed out than the latter. Basically, the game has 5 elements: fire, electricity, water, ice, and wind. And a good chunk of the abilities in the game can be enhanced by those elements. You can have a sizzle blade to burn through enemies while you cut them, a zap bomb to send sparks around in an explosion, a blizzard whip to freeze enemies at a distance. It's all pretty cool. This is a neat idea, and it does lead to some pretty interesting puzzles, especially later in the game. Plus, there are extra combos outside of those, though mainly through the stone power. If you hit a stone Kirby or Rocky while they're in the stone form with wind, water, or ice, it'll turn them into a curling stone straight out of crystal shards. And if they're hit with paint, they grow super big and do additional splash damage around them. The ESP ability can even lift them up and drop them. It's weird how stone was the big outlier with the ability mixing, but I'm not complaining. The other big change up to gameplay is the friend platform. Hop on one of these and you can do a brief mini section that plays completely differently. This is fine. It's not terrible. I honestly think the Friend Circle and Friend Train are pretty fun, and the Friend Star is super cool since each friend has a different projectile depending on their ability. But the Friend Bridge is basically just a get the monkey with a key to the door puzzle, and overall, the sections tend to not be very long. It's not like the Hypernova from Triple Deluxe where once you pick one up, you're going to be doing the Hypernova stuff for the rest of the level. No, once you reach the end, you generally know it, and the only ones that go on for a while are the Friend Star sections and, like, the very last Friend Train in a bonus level. It's a neat distraction, but that's really all it is. Overall, though, the game is pretty solid. The level design is pretty simplified to compensate for the usual chaos of 4-player multiplayer, but there is still a fair bit of work put into it. There aren't these same collectibles to go for like the last few games use that you have to get to progress, which does kinda sting. Instead, the main collectibles in each level are the puzzle pieces. Throughout each level are a handful of these, including one rare puzzle piece that can only be found in that level. These all build the celebration puzzles based around the previous main entries in the series, and they're pretty fun to put together. They look nice, but I don't know. The last two games had similar collectibles in the keychains and stickers, but there, each one was its own piece of small art, with a lot of them being cool callbacks to the past games, with all of the keychains being sprites from prior entries, or for the last few, sprite versions of characters from the current game and Return to Dreamland. Here, the puzzle pieces are all just parts of the image. And while the final puzzles look nice, it is still a bit underwhelming. There's also the fact that, unlike something like the energy spheres from Return to Dreamland, the puzzles don't actually unlock anything. They are fully optional to complete, and you don't even need to finish them to get to 100%, and with these being the only collectibles in the game, it raises the question of, why even bother solving the puzzles the game throws at you? Well, I mean, they are a slight challenge, even if the game pretty much always gives you the exact abilities you need to solve it, and if you have AI friends with those abilities, basically all you have to do is press up on the controller for a little while and they'll solve the puzzle for you. Yeah, you know how I said some people thought the game was too easy? To be honest, the game's challenge is pretty much just in observation skills, and even then, only occasionally for optional challenges. Since the game basically requires you to have a full team of 4 the majority of the time, any enemies go down extremely quickly, and like I said, the puzzles are all extremely easy whenever they do come up. The only real challenge in the main game is honestly just finding the puzzles, looking for the hidden doors that lead you to optional rooms. And there are a lot of these, seriously. Sometimes it feels like I complete a challenge area, take 2 steps, and there's another challenge area right there. It gives the impression that there's a lot of content to be sure, but, well, it's all optional. So, yeah, the main game is easy. I don't think anyone is really going to disagree there. The other big complaint, though, is how little of it there is, with a lot of people complaining the game was absurdly short. Which, I don't know. I mean, is it that much shorter than, say, Planet Robobot? Well, slightly. There are 40 levels in Star Allies, 2 less than Robobot's 42. Now that's not a lot less, and to be honest, I think there is a fair bit of content in here. In some ways, the adventure has a bit more meat on it than the previous games, if only in one area, the boss levels. See, in the previous 3 entries, the boss levels were basically just that. They're almost entirely just the boss arenas, with maybe one area beforehand to grab new abilities. And while that does work, here in Star Allies, the boss levels are actual levels. They have challenges, puzzles, and even rare puzzle pieces. It's not too much, the levels are still generally shorter than standard stages, but it is still cool. The thing is, I think they did this because of just how many boss stages there are in this game. Oh my god. 14 of the game's stages end with a boss fight. And like I said, while they do have more content than other boss stages in Kirby games, they are still shorter experiences. Compare that to Triple Deluxe and Planet Robobot, which each had 42 stages, of which only 6 were entirely focused on bosses, and you start to get an idea of the problem. Also, a lot of the content is completely optional, which is kind of weird. There are a total of 10 bonus levels in the game, with 1 being unlocked after beating the main story, and while these bonus levels are a lot of fun, it feels like the developers went overboard here. Again, look at the 3DS games. They both had 7 bonus stages, which required getting every main collectible in a world before you can unlock them. Here, you unlock the bonus stages by just hitting a switch in a random main level, which works fine. It does give you something to look for in the stages other than puzzle pieces, but, like, when a quarter of the levels in the game are completely optional, then, well, it makes the main adventure feel a lot smaller. If you're just going through the main story, powering through to the end, you'll only play through 30 levels, of which 14 are boss stages. And that's before mentioning how there are only 4 main worlds that the levels are split between, when the previous games had at least 6. This is also where the fairly generic theming really hurts too. While the levels in the game do have themes, 3 of the 4 worlds have pretty much none, with the 2nd and 4th in particular acting as full grab bags of themes and locations. It does make things more varied, which I appreciate, and if you're playing through for the first time, you won't know what to expect from each level. The problem is, this makes the whole game kind of bleed together in the mind. I honestly think the 3rd world is the most memorable area in the game because it's the only one that hard commits to a theme, being an invasion of the big villain's base on Popstar. It's really cool, but again, there are only 6 required levels, 4 of which have bosses. So we only have 16 standard levels with pretty much no coherent theming connecting them, 14 boss levels that, by the way, only have about 9 or 10 unique boss ideas between them and are shorter than the standard levels, and 10 bonus levels that you really don't need to even unlock unless you're going for 100% completion. All of this leaves an adventure that's shorter than the entries on 3DS and somehow feels even shorter. And during that time, you're going through challenges where the hardest obstacle is getting NPCs around moving blocks through levels that, though visually impressive, look like they could have been made for any game in the series. So why the fuck do I still love this game? Look, I've completed New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe multiple times, maybe my opinion is just bad. Here's what I'll say. This game may be simple as all hell, but it is polished. This is a remarkably solid game, with pretty much all the same mechanics from the previous entries that everyone loves, and incredibly polished level design. If you're actively playing through the game, there's more or less nowhere where you'd go, oh well, this level isn't very fun, or that could use some work. Well, okay, maybe the friend AI with moving walls and blocks, but you know what I mean. Plus, I don't know, even if the level themes and designs aren't that memorable, I do think a fair few levels do leave a distinct impression. The turning gears in Nature's Navel, the time of day switching for Extraplanet Alpha, oh man, the post-boss sequence from Heavenly Hall where after you beat her you have to escape from the crumbling base and you use the friend platforms to go backwards through pretty much the whole world. My favorite level is definitely Planet Caverna. It's basically just a mini-boss rush, but it's laid out so you can fight them in any order you want. And there's this puzzle at the bottom where you use almost all of the mini-boss's abilities to get the rare puzzle piece, but you can totally cheese half of the sections if you bring the right friends with you. Oh, and if you get down to the entry door at the beginning, but then fly back up, you can do a harder version of all the mini-bosses where you fight against two of the more challenging variants, and it's all so cool! This game also has a ton of copy abilities, I think the most of any Kirby game, but don't quote me on that. We get a lot of fan favorites, Water from Return to Dreamland, obviously, plus Beetle from Triple Deluxe and ESP from Planet Robobot, Suplex and Plasma return, which I don't think anyone was expecting, but they work really well. We even have new abilities. Staff is basically a variant on Spear from the previous entries, but capable of some really weird stuff. The Spider ability lets you web up enemies and then kick them around, plus you can spin a web for you, your friends, and you to bounce on. But oh my god, Artist is the coolest. You get to paint enemies, you can paint these random signs throughout the game, and you can even paint these mini creatures that can attack enemies for you. It's so great, I love it a lot! And this isn't even touching on the story. Oh man, this game's story is insane. Even people who don't like the game will generally admit this plot is wild. It only really begins clearing up around the halfway mark once you start fighting the bosses in the third world, but by the end, it's putting some of the other game's darkness to shame. Basically, the whole game only happens because a cult is trying to resurrect an ancient god of destruction, Void Termina, who might have also been the one who created the entire Kirby universe. And then, when you find him at the end, you have a 3D shooter where you target eyes appearing all over his body, and then you go inside and you open his soul like a party ball, and then holy shit, his soul looks like Kirby. What? Yeah, so apparently Kirby might be the reincarnation of an ancient god who also is 100% the origin of dark matter, one of the only recurring threats in the whole Kirby series, and then the final attack is, as is custom for Kirby by now, the most anime thing this side of actual anime. Oh man, I love this game! So yeah, that's the main game mode. Definitely divisive, and I fully understand why, but I really do think it's a quality ride. However, anyone familiar with Kirby knows the main story isn't the full package. We've got a handful of extra modes to go through as well. For now, we're going to stick with what was in the game at launch, since I also want to tackle the idea that the game needed updates to finish it. First up, we have Guest Star mode, or to give it its proper name, Guest Star ? Star Allies Go ! Fun fact, sometimes I wonder if my fanfic titles for Kirby are too much, and then I remember this is an official game mode, and I stop worrying so much. This is essentially the extra mode of the game, and it follows on from DDD Tour in Triple Deluxe and Meta Nightmare Returns in Planet Robobot. You play through a slightly shorter version of the game, going for the fastest time while controlling one of the friends. It's a simple idea, and it works very well. This time, there is an additional collectible in the form of power-up hearts. See, at the start of each section, your characters have lower health, are slightly weaker, and move slightly slower, but as you collect these hearts, you eventually become stronger and faster than even the default for the main game. This does mean that once you get most of the hearts, the adventure is even easier than the main game, but to counteract that, you have a more limited move pool, since you have to stick to one friend for the whole journey and can't just switch copy abilities like Kirby can. I will say, this mode does feel a bit cut back compared to the previous two extra modes. There's nothing really new outside of the power-up system, no special abilities like Meta Knight or speedrun portals like in DDD Tour, no harder boss variants either, oddly enough, which is basically a staple of Kirby. Admittedly, the main game already has a fair number of harder versions of bosses like Wispy Wood's dad or Metal Raccoon and Fox, but it's kinda weird that they didn't even move things around for Guest Star. There's also a fair amount of the game removed, with each friend having different rooms removed if they don't suit that friend's ability, and all of the Friend Star sections removed across the board, which I do not get. The Friend Star is like the coolest friend move. Why get rid of that but not the damn bridge? Even the Dream Friends, you can only play as them once you've beaten the mode once, but for the Dream Friends that were there at launch, there is no new content. It's literally the same adventure, just playing as DDD or Meta Knight. It's weird. Also, pro tip, don't play through every character's guest star. It's way too repetitive. Just do one with your favorite copy ability, or maybe Kawasaki since he's like the only friend for a one-shot ability, and then do the Dream Friends. Post-update Dream Friends preferably. Like I said, there's nothing special for being Bandanity. Shame. There is one bit of new content at least, the final boss. After beating Highness, the pre-Void Termina final boss, you see the super fast credits, and then it turns out, in this version of events, they were actually summoning Galactonite, returning from Planet Robot. And then, like, a butterfly, who's appeared in pretty much every opening cutscene since Return to Dreamland, who we all thought was just like a callback to the opening cutscene of Dreamland 1 and Spring Breeze from Superstar. That butterfly absorbs Galactonite and turns into Morphonite. Yeah, 4 years and another appearance later, I still don't understand. Apparently, according to Japanese pause screens, this thing is like a Grim Reaper who, like, judges final battles. Yeah, I don't know. The fight is cool, and it's definitely different enough from Galactonite to justify the new character, but I feel like it's kind of hurt by the power-up parts. If you collect all of the attack and speed power-ups in a level, you can basically melt through any of the boss fights. And while that can be satisfying, it does leave Morphonite with a pretty underwhelming first impression, when you can beat him in less than 2 minutes. Still completely wild, but yeah, a little easy at full power. Finally, we have this game's equivalent of the arena, the Ultimate Choice. This is the, at this point, obligatory boss rush mode for the game, though with a bit of a different twist. Rather than just having 1 or 2 versions where you fight through all the bosses, and then maybe all the harder versions of the bosses, Ultimate Choice instead gives you a difficulty selection, from the easy as hell Sweet Breeze to the more challenging Sizzling Thread, along with the unlockable difficulties going up to Soul Melter. Each difficulty has a different number of bosses as well as different ratios of healing items, with Sweet Breeze having only 4 fights and 6 Maxim Tomatoes, and Soul Melter having 13 challenging fights and 6 oranges that only heal like a fifth of your HP. It's definitely interesting, especially since each difficulty has different puzzle piece rewards, but honestly, I'm not sure if I'd say it's any better than the standard arenas. Basically, the only reason to do the easier difficulties is to either grind out puzzle pieces, try and get high scores on all of them, or practice for the harder difficulties. Also, Soul Melter feels kind of like a ripoff. It's essentially the true arena of the game, but the only fight that's different from the next level down, Infernal Crisis, is the final one, with Void Termina becoming Void Soul. Instead, they make it harder by reducing your health down even further and giving you weaker healing items, which is the cheapest form of difficulty curve. Also, while I love the shooter section of the Void Termina fight, it is kind of cheap how this and the fights in the Ultimate Choice are the only times this gameplay style is ever used, so when the Soul fight makes it significantly more difficult, you don't have the actual practice you'll need to overcome the obstacles. Still, Void Soul is pretty cool. I don't know, just not a lot to say. So, that was Star Allies at launch. Do I understand why people had issues with it? Of course, there is a lot to be critical about. But I really don't think this is the worst Kirby game like some fans act like it is. Far from it. I mean, really, I know everyone loves how it introduced the animal friends and dark matter, but is Dreamland 2 really significantly better than Star Allies? I mean, maybe, it's literally all opinion. However, shortly before the game was released, it was announced that the game would be getting free updates, with the stars of the show being 9 new Dream Friends from across the series. The Dream Friend mechanic was a part of the base game, allowing Kirby to summon DDD, Meta Knight, and Bandanity, but I think the updates definitely fleshed this mechanic out the way it deserved. Though, calling the characters friends is maybe an exaggeration. I know Megalore apologized if we're accepting Kirby's Dream Collection in his canon, but Marx and Dark Meta Knight, not only are both of them incredibly dangerous and unrepentant, with the fact even being referenced in the Japanese version, but like, aren't both of them supposed to be dead? Okay, we're getting a bit long here. Let's go through these 9 Goopers rapid style. Wave 1, we got Rick and Kine and Koo, Marx and Gooey. If Rick is able to spit fire and bounce on enemies, Koo can fly and shoot cutter-like wind power wings, and Kai can free enemies underwater or splash around like a magic carp on land. Marx has his wings and black hole ability from Superstar, plus he can ride around on a bouncy ball and kick it at enemies, as well as spit them out while he's flying. Also, he can be affected by elements. Gooey can do the burning fireball move, lick things up, and use his tongue like a whip, turn into a stone because why not, and he can fly around and shoot lasers like the dark matter he is. Wave 2, Adeline and Ribbon, Dark Meta Knight, and Deroche. Adeline is based on the artist ability, but she can also summon a few bosses from before, which gives her access to electricity and ice, as well as cutting abilities. Dark Meta Knight plays a lot like Meta Knight, but with a lot of mirror-related effects, which can, of course, reflect projectiles, plus he can still be affected by elements. Daroche has a wand that can fire ice shots, he can throw bombs, which if charged have fire, he can shoot a triple star like his boss fight, plus teleporting around, and he can summon the rest of this Greek god, with Doc having zap, Spinny being able to cut, and Storo being heavy and able to push in stakes. Final wave, wave 3, Magolor, Taranza, and Susie. Magolor can shoot energy spheres that have zap and at max power have sizzle, he has a dash attacks with wind power, he can make big noodles come out of the ground, he can throw the microtransaction currency from the Kirby clashes, he can summon the Lord Starcutter, form a black hole, use the Ultra Sword, and teleport by disappearing. Taranza is based on its fire ability, but with some strong AoE attacks, including summoning Sectonia and having her zap the area around herself, plus energy balls and Strange Lock. Finally, Susie has a blaster that can shoot elements or just pure energy, a hover pack and super dash that can both hurt enemies bad, and she can summon her business suit to cause serious damage, all while being affected by the elements. Clearly, there was a fair amount of content added in these updates. In addition to all of this, each update made slight tweaks to the game, plus overall they added 10 new puzzles to be completed, which was pretty cool. Now, the fact that this was announced before the game was released led some to ask why this all wasn't in the game at launch, especially since the new Dream Friends made that mechanic a lot more interesting. Personally, I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but I think the honest answer is they probably wanted to include more Dream Friends at launch, but decided to bring them out as updates so they could launch earlier. Still, I don't think any of them make the game more complete, at least to any significant degree. Here's the thing. With all the updates, the main story mode never changed, beyond a few visual tweaks. To me, that more or less means the story mode was finished in the developers' minds, with all the additions just being bonus content for fans. Now, these friends did make guest star mode a hell of a lot more interesting. Each one had at least some altered level design, usually based on either the games they were representing, or based around using their unique abilities in creative ways. It's a lot more interesting to play through, since even the friends based on pre-existing abilities have completely different gameplay. You can also use them in story mode if you want to summon them, which as someone who's played through more than once after all the updates is pretty cool, though because of the puzzles you can only really have 1 or 2 at a time max. However, the final update added something special to the game, a brand new game mode, Heroes in Another Dimension. This is the new challenge mode for the game, which tasks you with solving puzzles and passing through areas with either specific copy abilities, specific Dream Friends, or a specific friend power, all while collecting friend hearts. It was definitely made because everyone complained the game was too easy. The puzzles are all a lot harder than in the main game, even if they still give you everything you need. And each of the 4 levels ends with a souped up, more difficult version of a pre-existing boss of the game. Then, once you beat all of them, you have a harder fight against Highness, followed by a boss fight against the 3 Mage Sisters all at once at full power. This is hell. Once you complete the mode with 100 friend hearts, you earn the Mage Sisters as a Dream Friend. All 3, in one character. Yeah, this is a bit overpowered. However, we might need that OP-ness, because if you beat Heroes in Another Dimension in the Soul Melter difficulty in the Ultimate Choice, you unlock Soul Melter EX, an even harder version of Soul Melter. You thankfully have all of your health and a good selection of healing items, but you have to fight all the extra hard bosses from Heroes in Another Dimension, and harder versions of each individual Mage Sister, and a harder version of Morpho Knight, and the hardest version of Void Termina, now known simply as Void. I've never beat this. I've tried before, but I cannot get past Void. Hell, most times I can't even get past his Termina phase. Again, I think that's partially because of the whole brand new gameplay style that I'm unpracticed in thing, but I am fully accepting of the possibility that I'm just really bad at it. I'm getting a Kirby amiibo soon though, primarily to cheat Planet Robobot's True Arena, but hey, maybe it can help me cheese this one too. So, that is Kirby Star Allies. I know this was a lot less structured than some of my other reviews, but I hope I've at least helped some people see why I really do love this game, and that it really isn't as bad as some people act like it is. Forgotten Land is still better though.